It was the year of 2007. Spider-Man 3 had just been released, and while it was a big financial success, it was panned by critics for having too many villains and ultimately being the weakest of the Spider-Man Tobey Maguire trilogy. But fans still wanted to see more of the series, so a fourth film was being considered to be developed, but it went through to what is known as development hell, and it was stuck there for about 3 years. Things were moving along pretty steadily. The cast was set to return and even had a release date of May 6th of 2011. But due to Sam Raimi's own failings and not being able to make Spider-Man 4 as great as possible, he ended up turning it down. And so Sam Raimi stepped down from Spider-Man 4, which ultimately led to Tobey Maguire being a loyal actor and stepping down from the role of Spider-Man to follow Sam Raimi's exit. And so Spider-Man 4 was ultimately scrapped, and in order to retain the film rights to the Spider-Man character, Sony threw together at the last minute The Amazing Spider-Man, which released in 2012, which got good reviews, but it didn't make as big of a splash, or it was universally praised as the Sam Raimi Spider-Man film that came out 10 years earlier in the year 2002, but it did well enough to where it could warrant a sequel, and so its sequel came in 2014 with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone returning. Sony had ambitions to set up their own Spider-Man cinematic universe with sprawling sequels and spin-offs, but the sequel failed to make past its budget, and it caused everything to fall apart in shambles.
Our mission today is to take the version of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that we got and fix it. Hello everyone, my name is Eli Hollingsworth and this is my brother
Jake Hollingsworth, and welcome to the Fanboy Fix-Up video
YouTube channel.
series.
Video series. We're both thinking different things on that. So yeah, this is Fanboy Fix Up, our YouTube channel where we will be fixing up movies. So this is kind of like a fan fiction-y thing, except we're just taking movies that already exist and trying to make them better. And just as a disclaimer, we want to say that this is not in the attitude of, oh, we're smarter than the writers, or we know story better than these people who are actually in the industry. This is just from the attitude of, we love Marvel, we love, Star Wars, Disney, all this stuff, and we just want to see them all succeed, and we want them to be good. So when something like The Amazing Spider-Man 2 happens, and it's not as good as maybe we hoped, we just come along and we say, well, what if it was better? And what if it was the version of the movie that we wanted to see?
Even though this movie is 8 years old at this point, it's still worth fixing.
Yeah, and we picked The Amazing Spider-Man 2 as the first episode because Kevin Feige, he gave notes to Sony before the movie was released, giving his ideas on how they could fix the story. And those were released on Reddit. Ooh, you said because of the Sony leak that happened?
Sony hack. It's a big Sony hack. All of Sony's plans for their Spider-Man universe were exposed. Basically, all of it got out to the public, and they found out what they were doing. And that was one of the things that got out was Kevin Feige's notes from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Probably from like a test screening, I think.
So yeah, because there's some stuff that he gives in the notes that are not in the movie. But if you want to see all of Kevin Feige's notes, link is down below in the description to whatever the Reddit page is. But we used those notes when we made, I used those notes when I made this pitch, so it really helped, and that's why we decided to make this the first episode of Fanboy Fix Up. But from now on, we're probably going to do more recent projects, and just let us know what you think of the whole idea, and all that stuff. But, first of all, since we don't want to be brats, or seem like jerks or brats, and we're just coming on and be like,
well, I didn't like this, and this, so let's fix that.
We want to give some things that we do like about The Amazing Spider-Man 2, because we both agree that we really like the movie. Like, me personally, I really enjoy it. I see what they were going for. I get what they were trying to do, even though it got muddled in, the story got a little bit convoluted, or a lot convoluted. And there was, Sony was just trying to set up all this stuff, and, there was a lot of corporate...
They are making promises that they couldn't keep in terms of setting up spin-offs.
Yes. That's, yeah, okay. Yeah, that's
even though those kinds of promises are the best kind.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is, I see what they were going for. We see what they were going for and how that kind of got muddled. But things I do like about this movie, for me, and then you can say what you like, but for me personally, what I like, I love the visual style. I love that they decided, the cinematographer, I forget his name, but how he decided to shoot on film and with anamorphic lenses. I just think that the movie looks beautiful. The visual effects are also very well done. The way they use this new kind of system to do the CG on Spider-Man even as he's swinging, as a full CG character. Like it still looks amazing. The movie looks incredible. Like it's one of the visually the best Marvel movies ever made. And it's mind-blowing because it came out in 2014, and it looks a lot better than most Marvel movies that you see nowadays. It just has a distinct, sharp visual style, and I love the visuals. Also, another thing you got to point out is Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. Their chemistry just crackles, and it comes off the screen, and you really feel the connection between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. Really beautiful thing. I also like Harry's storyline. I like Harry Osborn's storyline, where they were going with it. Once I kind of was writing it and I understood what they were trying to do, it made a lot more sense to me, and I really like that plot line. I like the music. I do like the music. I know a lot of people kind of hate on it sometimes, and I do think it was a little weird when they tried to do the voices in Electro's head as part of the music. I did not like that. That was kind of weird. But I do think the music itself was pretty cool, and I really liked it. But yeah, those are things I liked about this movie. So Jake, what did you like about this movie?
Well, sort of going off what you said, it's a very amazing, pun intended, looking movie. It's probably the best visually out of the Spider-Man movies. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, best Spider-Man couple by far. I know people who love Tom and Zendaya. I mean, they're great, and Toby and Kirsten are great, but come on, Andrew and Emma are easy. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are easily the best by far. Also, it's worth knowing this costume in this movie is by far one of the best live-action Spider-Man suits, period. This costume for Spider-Man in the movie is hands down one of my favorites ever that's ever been put to live action. There's only one. I mean, of course, the Tobey Maguire suit is a classic, but this one, I like it more than Raimi's. There's one Spider-Man costume that I think beats it, but this one I do think is very much amazing. And then personally, I mean, of course, most of this movie is mostly a mess. Just to get that clear. I mean, this movie it's not. I mean, I do like this movie. I used to hate it, but now I've come around and kind of enjoy it, and really do enjoy it. I mean, even though I do accept that this movie, we can all agree, is a mess, like completely big of a mess. But I do think I think it has it does have a heart to it. I do think I could see where it was going. And I think that one thing I like this movie is how much it highlights the character of Peter Parker and how true it is to the character of Spider-Man, like where he's like late for his graduation while he's trying to stop. I said this on my Spider-Man podcast.
Link in the description.
Basically what I said in that podcast was like one of the things I love is that they're doing Peter Parker character justice, like where he's like trying to stop Rhino as quick as possible while also trying to get to his graduation as Peter Parker, doing what the video game did, where it's like Peter Parker and Spider-Man's worlds collide. But like some of the stuff I complained about in this video, we're kind of be mentioning here. Like I do really think this movie is good, and I also, spoiler alert, I actually like this better than the first Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. Spoilers.
Oh yeah, me too.
But like, I mean, I know that might be a bit of a hot take, and some people might think I'm crazy. But yes, I like this one better than the first movie. But I do think that it has its flaws, and it is very much a jumbled mess of a movie. But there are ways that it can be fixed. This movie can probably be salvaged from the movie's destroyed yard that is Sony Studios.
Yeah, because that's the case. What's going to be for most of these movies that we do for Fanboy Fix Up is there's potential to have a great movie. It's just there's like a few things in this movie, like a lot of little things. I think it's Death by a Thousand. What's it called? Death by a Thousand Scratches or Death by a Thousand Cuts. Death by a Thousand Cuts. That's what it is. That's the saying. It's I think it's Death by a Thousand Cuts. Although I think the main overarching problem is too many plot lines.
Too many subplots, I would say.
Yeah, but it's like all the little things in the movie that are just like, oh, that was weird. Well, that was not great. That was kind of dumb. Why'd they do that? Just like as you're watching the movie along the way that it's just like, and then when you get to the end of it and you're like, well, all these little things add up to like kind of a big thing. So, but I'd really enjoy it. I think when you said you think it does a Spider-Man character justice, I think
Yes.
Andrew Garfield is, as an actor, the most true to Spider-Man out of the three live-action ones.
Agreed.
He's probably, I'd say he's my favorite live-action Spider-Man. Yeah.
I'm not gonna spoil. I mean, I did spoil what I think about this movie, but I'm not gonna spoil who my favorite live-action Spider-Man is because I'm surprised I haven't said that on my podcast. I'm not gonna spoil it here. I'm gonna save that for the No Way Home episode.
Because for the longest time, literally up until I was sitting down here, both of us had been like, well, now after seeing No Way Home, kind of the three of them are equal. But like, even just down to like, just Andrew Garfield's easily the best actor out of the group too. Like, just like, apart from Spider-Man, as an actor overall, he is definitely the best. And even just like small things like how he has this Midtown New York kind of slight accent mixed in. Even the way he talks, there's so much detail in there. Like with the different, like he uses like a mix of 3 different New York type accents, and like just even that much attention to detail is what I'm blown away by. That is how much dedication. And all 3 of them are, except for, I don't know about Tobey Maguire as much, but all 3 of them are huge Spider-Man fans to begin with.
Tobey Maguire was the only one who didn't read his Spider-Man comic
Yeah.
before filming his movie. So
Yeah.
I'm sure he still was a big fan of Spider-Man.
I don't know if he is. I don't
He
know.
probably was either before or after.
It's probably more like a job to him. Like for Andrew Garfield, I know it was definitely a labor of love. Like he was so
Tom
excited.
Holland was really
Yeah,
excited.
Tom Holland, it was a labor of love. Like they were both like so excited because they got to play this character that they've grown
Tom
up
Holland was
loving.
even excited because he got to deal with a bunch of other Marvel heroes as Spider-Man.
See, it's always those like British or yeah,
It is those British people.
it's the British people. We need to hire more British people as Spider-Man. Tobey Maguire, American, but I'm just kidding.
I'm gonna work for them. They said to change their accent whenever they're filming.
Yeah, see exactly. That's what, and they're both great actors. So whatever. So that's all the things that we like about the movie. Now let's get into
Fixing this
The
because,
pro-
like we said, like this movie has its moments, it has its bright spots, it has its heart, but like I said earlier, it's a mess.
It has a few pretty high highs, but also like
A
lot
lot
of
of the
lows.
lows kind of like drag it down. Yeah. From being truly amazing. Or
okay, so
spectacular.
my biggest problem with this movie, the thing that drives me nuts, is the parents' plotline.
That part I hate
cannot
that plot
stand
line.
The parents'
Because
plot.
it's just like it doesn't go anywhere. Like you don't really learn much about. They don't really focus much about because they do it and then they just focus on a bunch of other plot lines. They have so many other plot lines to focus on. That parents' plot line arguably has the most screen time out of all the plot lines in that movie, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, like, we don't get our real first confrontation of it until, like, 80 minutes into the movie. That's when Peter sees Aunt May looking at his obsession wall, which was also very strange. And then
That's what I did on my recent Spider-Man podcast, was when I was analyzing what happened to the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man franchise. I really felt like him taking all these details about what it would have been and taping it all together with like a red yarn.
Yeah, except you did it mentally, which is what
Yeah.
a normal person would do.
That's what I did for that one and the Spider-Man 4 one.
Yeah, so you did it in a normal way, as opposed to in this movie where he does the whole thing on his
It
wall.
would be cool to do it. It would be cool to do it like in real
Yeah,
life.
it would, but then it'd also be a pain to clean up.
It doesn't seem that hard. Also, I don't even think Peter even cleaned this up in the movie. But okay, that's
No,
that
he
was
did,
his-
because remember there was that scene where he, like, ripped it all down?
Oh yeah, that's right, he did. All right, anyways, I digress. But still, so I do that a lot on the podcast.
What, digress?
Yeah, like I was going on with that like a side note, and I was just saying, and it went I digress.
Like
So
right now?
yeah. So the point is, parents subplot arguably has the most
Yeah.
screen time, goes nowhere.
And again, okay, I just want to say, if you don't know what we're talking about, which if you haven't seen the movie, then you should probably go see it. That would
But
be a
watch
good
the
idea.
first movie first, and then watch the second one.
Yeah. So
Or if you're someone who doesn't care about watching sequels before first movies, just go for it.
yeah, you should probably go see it if you haven't yet. But I'm guessing you'll probably have.
You can't go see it's not in theaters, but you should go see it.
Yeah, and what we're talking about is this plotline where Peter is trying to uncover the mystery of
His
why his
parents.
parents left. They died in a plane crash, and he's trying to unravel this whole. And there's this big giant conspiracy involving his parents
Peter's dad,
and Oscorp.
and Peter Parker being the chosen one, which
Yeah, so
Let's-
like that they have it in the movie to where his father put his DNA into a radioactive spider, and so then when it bites someone, then it transfers its powers to that person. But if it's anyone other than Peter Parker, then they would die because Peter Parker has his dad's blood, and it's just all
he
this.
made it to where basically the gist of it is where he made it to where only a Parker could gain the powers
Yeah.
of the spider. That's
But
the main.
but
gist
here's the
of it.
thing. Here's the thing. It doesn't have
It
very
doesn't-
much at all to do with the rest of the movie.
It doesn't have, it ruins the character. It ruins Spider-Man's origin. It also doesn't have much to do with that at all with the plot
Yeah.
of the movie.
So that's really the main problem for me. All the other there's like things that sure can be trimmed out, or
All those subplots for spin-offs can be trimmed out because those never materialized. You could argue Venom materialized because that was one of the spin-offs that they were planning to do was Venom, but even then that was definitely not what they were planning to do because it wasn't tied to Andrew Garfield's universe at all. Although people were theorizing that it could be in the Andrew Garfield universe, but we don't know for sure. No, it's like because we don't honestly, who cares which universe Venom's in at this point?
Yeah, it's in the Sony universe. but whatever.
Who cares?
So I think it's just death by 1,000 cuts. That's what it is. Just a lot of plot lines.
Some of the villains even have like a lot of plot lines. Like Green Goblin, one of our 3 villains, has like 3 different plot lines attached to him.
Yeah.
Because he's dying of a new disease. Oscorp's trying to undermine him, and then he goes on. He turns into the Green Goblin. It's like 3 different plot lines for one villain.
Yeah. I mean, Harry, even Kevin Feige said this in his notes. Harry feels like more of the main plot of the movie, not as much Electro, but...
And even at the end, when he does turn to Green Goblin, when Harry does turn to Green Goblin, he does feel kind of forced.
Yeah. But here, let's get into the changes. How do we fix the Amazing Spider-Man? Because I always feel bad when I sit and criticize a movie, and then I always think to myself, well, then how would you do it better, Eli, if you're going to criticize it? So this is us. This is how we would do it better. So for the opening scene, and this was in Kevin Feige's notes, the opening scene, the movie begins with, we cut out the plane crash because, again, that's part of the parents' subplot, and nobody cares about that. Nobody likes that.
The parents'
I don't think there
plot
was a single person who was like, that was my favorite part of the movie, was the parents' subplot. I love that. Nobody. So nobody liked it. So we're cutting that completely out. That plot line is getting completely taken out of the movie because we don't need it. It takes away screen time from developing other plot lines, and it's just like, it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. So taking it out. So instead of opening with the plane crash, which is tied to that whole plotline, we open with Harry coming home and seeing his dad dying of the Norman Osborn, or the Osborn genetic disease. So it's the same scene that we see later in the movie, except it's moved to the beginning, because that was Kevin Feige's note. I thought it was a great idea, and it makes more sense because it sets up Harry, his involvement with Peter, and probably in there Norman Osborn can have a line where he mentions Peter Parker, maybe, or Harry flashes back to Peter and him as kids, because it's kind of out of nowhere that they were like, oh, we were such best friends as kids, even though we don't see them at all like together in the first movie.
That feels like kind of like forced plot in there. It's just so they can have them still be friends.
Yeah. So, yeah, instead of the plane crash, which is kind of weird and dumb, we have the Harry Osborn coming home to find Norman Osborn dying. And then that's when Norman Osborn dies. But we don't have the whole newscast thing yet, which half the movie is...
A lot of information in this movie told you from the newscast. Like,
Yeah.
basically, it's just like Norman Osborn dies, told their news broadcast. When Spider-Man disappears, told their news broadcast. Rhino breaking out of prison, told their news broadcast.
Yeah.
Spider-Man being called web crawler, being told their news broadcasts.
Which that's like that's a little nitpick of yours.
Other people have pointed out, but yeah.
The news doesn't know.
Yeah, I know, but they should. But the writer writing that line of dialogue should know. But that's Walker. But anyway, I digress. So, opening scene changes. So Paul Giamatti, he's not even really a villain. He's just kind of there. He's just kind of the opening bad guy for the Spider-Man, for the classic Spider-Man chase sequence, and he's also the guy that bookends the film, which for some reason they put in the trailer. I don't understand why they did that, but
they put a lot in the trailer that shouldn't have been in there.
But that was 8 years ago, so you can't change that. So Paul Giamatti, one problem with him was he was hyper. Like, I don't know what.
Yeah. I don't know how a human being.
I don't know what he did before filming that, but whenever he did, he was nuts. So tone that down so he seems less crazy, and so we can actually understand what he's saying. So tone him down.
You can understand what he's saying. It's just so loud.
Yeah, it's just like tone him down. It's making him seem a little bit more like the traditional Rhino character. And so instead of kind of like Kevin Feige said in his notes, don't start with Spider-Man swinging in. Kind of like let the danger and the stakes start building.
Because you got to think about the previous scene was Harry Osborn watching his dad die. Yeah. If we start out with this big heroic like sweeping Spider-Man swinging through the city, the tone just doesn't exactly.
So that's the problem
match.
with the original version, was that the tone was out of control.
We have this big dramatic spy plane crash scene.
Dramatic spy, like the crash scene. Then we have cartoonish villain with Rhino, cartoonish nerd Electro. All while Gwen Stacy's giving a speech saying, "We never know when we're gonna die. Live life while you can." It's just. Yeah.
Which to me, like, that whole speech encapsulates more of what the theme of this movie is. The theme that I saw in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was these themes about, like, living your life in fear. Like, because you look at Electro, right? He had basically his whole life taken away from him. He worked so hard for Oscorp to build this, like, power grid thing.
He doesn't get credit for it.
They don't give him credit. They are, like, mean to him, and they put him, and this awful thing, accident happens to him where he turns into this blue electric creature, And
You and Smurf.
what does he do? He plays the blame game and blames Oscorp, blames Spider-Man, and he gets all resentful and mad about it. And that's where he makes the mistake, and that's where he's considered the villain, because he was so like resentful, and what he chose to do was blame someone else and just say, oh well, my life's so terrible because of this person, and he didn't own it. He didn't like try to figure out maybe how to live with it, or get help. He just got mad at someone. And you look at Harry Osborn. He finds out he has this disease, and he's probably going to die in a couple of years, although it's probably going to be a couple decades. And the first thing he does is just try to do everything he can to stay alive right now, even though he's not going to die for a couple of years. His dad died when he was, 50, 60 years old? So
He was
that's
like 60, and then that was I find that I see like Harry Osborn dies Norman Osborn dies when he's 60, and Harry Osborn's like 7. He's like Peter's age, and he's fearing he's gonna die, which like he really should be.
All of a sudden, Harry Osborn starts flipping out. That's where he made the mistake. Instead of focusing on living life to the fullest now, he starts living in fear of when he's gonna die. And here's the newsflash, Harry: everyone's gonna die, but whatever. So that's the
There's
mistake.
no point in resurrecting whoever dies.
Yeah, that's the mistake he made of all of a sudden getting all concerned about where his life is going and when it's gonna end, because he knows it's gonna end soon, and then he starts freaking out, and that's where he begins his downfall to the villain. And Peter, in his relationship with Gwen, is not right, because Peter is living in fear of Gwen dying. He's making all of these choices based on the fact that Gwen might get hurt. All of these people start living their life. Harry and Spider-Man start living their life in fear, and that's when Spider-Man makes the mistake with his relationship with Gwen Stacy. So the movie is more about making, living your life to the fullest right now, because everyone's going to die eventually. And if you live your life in fear, then a life lived in fear is a life half lived. That's a quote from Baz Luhrmann. Strangely applies.
All right, so back to the Paul Giamatti. Back to opening
yes.
chase sequence. So yeah, that's definitely the theme, probably the theme of the movie. But so we go back to that. The scene starts with LG-67 stealing the P-238. But Spider-Man doesn't drop in immediately, like we said before, so he doesn't come in for a few minutes. But when he does come in, heroically entering the scene after letting the state endangered the States come in and like Spider-Man swing in, when he does end up saving Max Dillon, who also, side note, should not have comb over and should not be an over obsessed nerd. Yeah. Tone that down a little bit.
Well, the thing is, like, the implication can be that he becomes a little bit more of a Spider-Man fan after Spider-Man saves him. Like, it makes more sense that after Spider-Man saves him, he becomes a little bit more interested in Spider-Man.
Okay.
Not as obsessed as he is in the movie, where he has this whole wall of
Spider-Man
he's like, you remember my birthday, right, Spider-Man? You remember my birthday?
Talking to a picture of Spider-Man.
Yeah,
like he's gonna respond.
really weird.
So
really
that's the definition of an obsessed fanboy. But
like a weirdly obsessed fanboy.
Yeah.
Like,
hopefully there's no people like that out there. So when he saves Max Dillon, it's from Spider-Man's point of view, not Max's. So whenever Gwen calls during the fight, Peter.
So a little bit more clarity on that, like the Max Dillon thing.
Yeah, Max Dillon.
In the movie, we cut to him walking along the sidewalk, and we were following him from his perspective as he gets, the blueprint's knocked over, which we never see again. And then Spider-Man comes in. It's all from Max's perspective. In the movie, in this version, it's from Spider-Man's perspective, because the movie needs to stay in Spider-Man's perspective because it's Spider-Man's movie. So Spider-Man swings in as he's coming to come save the city from Paul Giamatti's tirade, and it's from Spider-Man's point of view as he sees Max and comes to help him as a random, by chance.
Yeah, so then he just saves them randomly. So then of course in the movie, whenever Spider-Man's on Rhino's truck, he gets a call from Gwen. So instead the change is that instead of doing it on the truck, Gwen doesn't call Peter until he's finding Lexi on the ground after he's already stopped the truck. Yeah. So then also whenever Spider-Man is finding Lexi on the pants, on the ground, unlike the theatrical film, Spider-Man doesn't pants Alexi because that's just a little silly for the Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, like that's the more of the tone thing where the tone is all over the place. Spider's like, "Oh, pull your pants down," and it's like,
it has little rhino underwear. Which is
like the studio was like, "Yes, that is a brilliant idea."
So then whenever Gwen is calling him, instead of doing what he does in the movie when Peter's lying about the sirens, saying that they're not sirens, instead he just kind of downplays it to where.
And also another tiny little note, I don't think Peter and Gwen should be together right now. Like it's a little bit like too messy if they're like together, and then in the dim sum scene they break up again, and like it's
because they imply in the movie, because they say in the movie, not implied, they say that in the movie that they've been breaking up and getting back together over and over again. So the difference in this movie is that after Amazing Spider-Man 1, they never got back together.
Yeah, that makes more because it doesn't make any sense to have them be together and then have a breakup scene and then like it undermines the emotional weight of Gwen dying at the end because Peter's like sad a lot in this movie.
He does get sad a lot in this movie.
So instead, like they're not together, which then I don't even think she should call him. She shouldn't call him at all. Nope, don't call Peter. The call is cut out. That doesn't really make any sense anyway. So she doesn't call.
So he doesn't. So Peter doesn't lie about the sirens, and he's just down because he wouldn't lie. He probably wouldn't lie about it. He was just downplaying.
He's like,
but
no,
instead of
sirens.
seeing Captain Stacy, he's just kind of awkwardly sitting in a police car next to him. He hears his. We have a flashback to the first movie, while hearing his voice.
Yeah.
So then instead of doing the whole like we mentioned when we made fun of in the theatrical version where Gwen's speech is going on during the full live action cartoon fight scene. So instead, Gwen's speech is actually started after Spider-Man beats Alexi. So
he's swinging back. He's swinging to the graduation, and then as he's swinging, it's kind of like slow-mo. A lot of these shots, and while we hear Gwen's speech about life and death or whatever, and as this is going on, Spidey sees a civilian trapped under a car. And he makes the choice to instead of
just going straight there, he just goes save the civilian, get him out from underneath the car, which presumably would have taken place during the Rhino chase. And then he saves this person. He goes off to the graduation, but then he realizes that the principal is very close to calling his name, and so there's a lot more like tension and like will he be able to get there in time. Although it would be funny, side note, he would have come in with a mask on, but still. Of course, we all know he's going to walk in just without his mask on. And that's normal Peter Parker in his graduation.
The end of Spider-Man, but okay.
Alright, and then also, like we said, Peter and Gwen would not be together, so no chemistry between them.
Well, it's okay, so he still meets her so how about we just keep it to where he, like, goes to the door of the dim sum and he sees her in there? Not as much as, like, they come and then they have this big scene where she breaks up.
Yeah, they're making a scene, so yeah.
They're making a scene.
Yeah, so I get that. So then it's keep the scene basically the same. Instead of just having Gwen walk out, he just sees them, and then he just kind of instead of Gwen, but Gwen doesn't see him until Peter's walking away. Is that another change that would make? When Peter sees them talking, he wants to go in, but he realizes he has to keep the promise he made to Captain Stacy. So instead, he just walks out, and then Gwen turns around and sees him walking away. Kind of similar to what it was in like Spider-Man 2, when he saw John Jameson walking away with MJ. So like kind of mirroring that a little bit.
Yeah.
Not ripping it off, just doing it because I think that works. So then keep the Spider-Man see the Spider-Man montage of him saving a bunch of people in the city. I mean, but also kind of downplay some of the silliness. Although I like some of the scenes where he like comes back to the fish and he gets sick. Maybe take some of that cartoonish stuff. Maybe take some of that stuff. Although I do like that in the film, especially at the Spider-Man 6 scene. I think that's a cool idea of Spider-Man getting sick on the job. I feel like you could take some of that cartoonish stuff, like he comes back with the fish and he like is sick and he has like feathers on his suit. I feel like you could take some of that out.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that to you. I didn't know if you would be okay with taking the sick stuff out, but yeah, I forgot about all that.
I do like that idea of like Spider-Man getting. I think I'll be happy to take it out to make it more serious, but I do like the idea of Spider-Man. Like, how would that work? Spider-Man getting sick on the job.
Yeah, I don't think that it belongs in this movie.
It doesn't belong in this movie, but I do think that's a good idea that could work.
Like, if you want to make a version of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 where you have Paul Giamatti on cocaine and Max Dillon as like a caricature nerd, then sure, that scene would fit in there. But in this movie, it's like trying to be serious and then it has all these weird, like, silly stuff. So cut that out. Doesn't need to be in the movie. And then next, we have the scene with Aunt May where Peter comes home as Spider-Man and he's like, "Oh, I'm naked. I'm so naked, Aunt May." And Aunt May's like, "Oh, I want to come in." And then like he's like, "No, don't come in." So
he webs his boots underneath his like sheets.
Yeah. So in this scene instead, like there's the part where he's like up on the ceiling and he's trying to get his costume off. He gets his boots off, and then like one of his boots falls down and actually hits his lock thing.
Yeah.
And so instead in that scene, like at the end after like Aunt May notices the boot somehow, and Peter doesn't know that she notices, so she kind of figures it out and knows that he's Spider-Man, but he doesn't know that. So that's kind of another thing. Like, that's one of Kevin Feige's notes. He said not to have the whole, like, Rosemary Harris wink all the time. Where it's like, does she know? Does she not know?
She probably does know.
Like, we find out that she does know. Like, she definitively knows that he's Spider-Man.
Like, she sees his boot.
Peter doesn't know that she knows. So That's another little change.
Max Dillon. So, like we mentioned, Max Dillon is a overdone cartoonist version of a nerd with glasses,
Spider-Man.
comb over, pretend that he's not bald, which is just weird. It's just weird to do that because of how Jamie Foxx is.
Yeah, they're like sitting on set and they were like, this is a great idea. We gotta have him bald and like with a comb over, trying not to be bald.
Wearing glasses. Be like, look at this nerd.
Yeah, he's just like Spider-Man. Like,
so then instead of having all that weird Spider-Man obsession, he doesn't have so instead of that, he is becoming a bit more fan of Spider-Man because he saved him and he even learned his name like in the movie. Although, do you want to keep that where he sees his name tag and calls him Max?
yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay, so he becomes obsessed with Spider-Man because Spider-Man saved him and he remembered his name. But he's not like overly like crazy.
Yeah, like obsessed. Like he has a wall full of Spider-Man stuff, which is really weird.
So then the scene where. I think it's probably after that. Like the scene where Peter's like on his computer sending an email to J. Jonah Jameson. Which, side note, for this movie they wanted to get a new actor to portray J. Jonah Jameson in the physical scene, but they couldn't find anybody to lift up the part, so they just dropped the idea altogether.
Yeah, well, because nobody can beat J.K. Simmons.
So then, hopefully that scene stays the same. Which would we add a new J. Jonah Jameson actor? No. So
no, I think it's nice to just kind of keep it as a tease. Like I liked that it's in there, just as
Jameson's out there. So then that scene stays the same. So then he learns about the Norman Osborn death through a news broadcast, like most of the stuff that's learned in this movie.
Like, okay, one newscast is fine.
When you do it like 5 times.
Yeah, like they're like we're too lazy to show it to the audience. So guess what? Everyone is constantly watching the news. Like I've never seen this many people watch the news this much in my life. I don't understand why these people are constantly watching the news, but whatever.
Well, there's probably interesting stuff on the news. So, in the electro transformation scene, then when he does things, of course I understand why they had to change this, because in the original comics, electro transformation is extremely goofy, where in the original comics, this one pulls from the Ultimate Comics. I think the Ultimate Comics is he was working for Kingpin. He was working for Kingpin in the Ultimate Comics, and Kingpin gave him those powers. And then eventually he turned blue. So that's what this one pulls from. The original Electro Comics, the one who wears the yellow and green star face mask, in that version of the series, the Earth 616, he gets struck by lightning while falling onto high tension power lines. No, I didn't make that up. And so
okay, but by the way, is that more unbelievable than the version of Electro that we see in the movie?
He plugs in
that's so
wires.
weird and comic booky. We're gonna make Electro like a total caricature of a nerd that
Well,
doesn't
it's actually
exist.
a little bit more cartoony, where he plugs in electrical wires, he gets electrocuted in a very cartoony way, he falls into a tank of electric eels, which is kind of a reference to the Spectacular Spider-Man cartoon. Not pointing that out also, but it's a cute little Easter egg. But it doesn't help with the fact I feel it's cartoony. So
yeah, well, okay. So I also want to add another change to that scene. Instead of it being in Oscorp, because the news breaks that Norman Osborn's dead, right? And then all the employees are being called to a memorial of his death. That's why everyone's getting off of work early. I don't know if that's clearly explained in the movie, but that's the reason why apparently. So that's why everyone's leaving because of Norman Osborn's death. They're going to a memorial or whatever.
They could have made
except Max, he has to stay behind and work. So the change of the scene is instead of going just some random electrical outlet, he goes to the power grid that he's been working on to set that up for the end of the movie because it just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So he actually goes
leave
there.
the electric eels out.
Yeah, and maybe do more of the thing where he does get struck by lightning. Like that.
As
much as they're too comic booky, we must make it realistic. The version of Electro that we have in the movie, is that really more unbelievable than that?
Yeah. So then, kind of mix the two origin stories together. But he has the same origin as the 616 Electro, but he still turns blue.
Yeah, at the power grid.
So he goes to the power grid, and there's a thunderstorm going on at night. He's working on the electrical grid, and he gets struck by lightning. And then, do we have him fall into high tension power lines, or is it just struck? Struck by lightning, and then that's it?
Well, no, he could be near the big things that are in the power grid.
Yeah.
He could just be near those and those connect with him or something, and then he gets,
So then of course after the Norman Osborn death, there's a big board scene. So then you're saying this shouldn't be with Felicia Hardy, who is the Black Cat in the comics.
Yeah, that's just too distracting. Where they're oh look, it's Felicia Hardy. Oh my goodness. So we'll just call her I don't know, Shelby, Shelby,
Sylvia.
like just some random, like she doesn't even matter. She's not anyone important. She's just there because Harry.
So cut.
likes her
Okay,
or
I
whatever.
get. I can understand. Cut Felicia Hardy out of the movie.
Then we have the scene, so
like
then we have
Peter
the
and Harry
board-
are bonding. That's a good. Like Peter and Harry
like
like
that
see each
scene.
other. I do like that scene where they're bonding, but it's weird how those guys are like following it. It's very unclear which one they're. I think they're following.
Well, yeah, because if you don't know what we're talking about, after the board scene, Harry goes out and sees that
Harry
Peter's
goes-
there.
like,
to
Harry
check-
leaves
check
the
on him.
board. Harry leaves the board to go see Peter,
Yeah.
and they're like catching up, and then like those creepy Oscorp guys are watching them
for no reason.
Stalkers.
Which they're just like watching them because, well, that's more part of the subplot about this whole conspiracy at Oscorp, where they're like trying to get rid of Harry or like
yeah.
they're just like
Originally, it was them following Peter to see if he was Spider-Man,
Yeah,
but then
like-
they changed it to
'cause then that was in
part
the
of the Harry conspiracy to undermine him to not be seen.
No, that was in the trailer though, where Harry's like, Oscorp's been keeping tabs on you, Peter.
Yeah, like it's like the guy, like what's his name, the gentleman at the end of the movie, the one with like the mystery fedora that we don't see his face. He's saying we have big plans for you, Mr. Park.
Yeah, like there's like stuff in the trailers like that where it's like he's like, Oscorp's been keeping tabs on you, and then Peter's like, why? And then Harry's like,
Isn't
that
that
the question of the
day?
day? We don't need this whole thing. So cut out the scene entirely because I see why they wanted that scene because in it they explain that they're covering up Max Dillon's like death per se.
Yeah.
It was thing. Like I get why we need that scene, but then again, Gwen learns it later. Like when she's looking through the file, she learns that they're covering up the whole Max Dillon thing. So we don't need that scene. So just cut out the scene entirely where the guys are monitoring them with the like in the car in the thing. It's just weird. We don't need it. And so instead of it being like we cut to that scene and then we cut to Electro or whatever, and then like we cut back to Peter and then Peter gets the call from Gwen, and that's when he goes to meet her at night. Directly after he has the little encounter with Harry, and he's like walking off and saying goodbye to Harry, that's when he gets the call from Gwen that she wants to like meet up again.
All right.
And that's where that scene ends.
So the scene ends there.
So then now we get to the first Electro fight in the movie, which in the original movie comes like an hour into the movie, which is kind of strange. But I don't know where it's gonna fall in here, like timeline wise, but
So then
hopefully earlier.
So then after everything that happens, so then first Electro fight scene. So it's the same sort of gist where he's fighting in Times Square, which that fight scene is awesome. I'm gonna say that right now. That fight scene is still the same, but like instead of like doing that thing where like Peter's been secretly following Gwen throughout like the course of
Yeah, their
like,
conversation is pretty much the same except for that.
yeah, it's like they're just like catching up, doing that cute little thing where they're like having like trying to be friends but establishing like ground rules and like boundaries. So it's kind of the same, but then the rest is the same to like go into the same kind of action scene, which like I said is visually great.
Yeah.
Except maybe take out a few of the advertisements because I feel like that got a little much.
What do you mean?
Like something like the advertisement, like in Times Square. I mean, I get it. Times Square is like a big buzz place in New York, but did you really need to put like that many advertisements in that one scene?
Yeah, was that like product placement?
It was product placement, but it was too much. I feel like so.
Okay.
I feel like maybe like pull back on that because I feel like they kind of overdid it. I mean, keep the Hershey's one. Maybe keep the one that says Hershey's and maybe take out some of the.
You remember
other
the
stuff.
product placements that were in there?
Yes, there was a Hershey's one, there was a Reese's, there was a Sony one, there was a Disney one. I could go on forever. But
Okay, I think maybe you were paying more attention to it than like everyone else was.
yeah, I think it was.
Everyone else is like, wow, there's some ads in Times Square. Let's watch the Spider-Man fight. And Jake's like, there's Hershey's, there's Reese's, there's Sony, there's all this. Which, by the way, actually speaking of, the Sony product placements are so dumb. Like,
Oh yeah!
so dumb.
Why did I forget? Like, there's a Sony Vio in the.
Yeah, their dumb little
Appreciate-
computer thing,
Like,
which
so
nobody
everyone
uses.
has a Sony Vio. Like the
Yeah.
people at the beginning of the flight in the crash
Oh.
scene, in the theatrical, be clear, the theatrical one that we got. There's a Vio in the cliche crashing. Peter Parker has a Vio. The people tracking Peter and Harry have a Vio. Peter Parker has a Sony camera, and then Peter Parker's watching Gwen's speech at the end of the movie on a Sony laptop.
Yeah, which I'm sorry.
Why is also? Why I'm surprised they didn't put a Sony. I'm surprised they didn't put a Sony logo on the Rhino suit.
I'm like, nobody uses Sony products. I'm sorry. Nobody uses them. You don't ever, when I'm out and about in this world and I'm going around and
I
people
can
are
guarantee you
using
that
stuff.
if there was a Sony Bio present at Times Square, like when you know how all those advertisements are getting fried,
Yeah.
like during the Times Square scene, I could guarantee you there was a Sony Bio there, it wouldn't be fried out.
Yeah,
I can guarantee you
it'd be like
it'd
the
survive.
Sony Vio reigns forever. Or like it was so dumb in the plane crash scene where they're like fighting over the laptop
They just
and he
don't
turns
over,
it he
don't
turns it
see
like to
bio.
the camera directly. He's like the Sony. They're like it's like the director was filming it and he has like a megaphone. And he's like, "Excuse me, we can't see the Sony Vaio. Could you turn it a little bit?" And he's like,
Yeah, exactly.
And then
that's why that's exactly why I'm saying like if it was at the Times Square, it wouldn't be Fry. It'd be like can't fry Sony Vaio.
yeah, the Sony Vaio is so powerful. It's so great, even though I've never seen one in my life.
But at the same time, Sony does that in all the movies. But this one is like over the top, like the Times Square advertisement. So, point of the story, pull back on some of the product placement because that's the thing that kind of bothers me a little bit. I mean, I think it's fine, but when you overdo it, I think it gets a bit much. And this movie is an example of that.
I agree. So that
But
whole
keep the
scene-
Hershey's sign. Some of the other stuff can be taken out.
And add a little extra thing, like in the Times Square scene, maybe he mutters a few lines about how Oscorp stole his life away or whatever, like to himself. And cut out the voices in his head thing.
Take that out.
Don't
because
need that. That's
distracting.
just weird.
So to make those few changes, but other than that, the fight scene can say the epic, spectacular, amazing scene that it is.
So then, like after this, Peter gets home and he's like depressed or whatever, and he's like watching news about the Electro fight. And then there's just like this little mini montage where he starts researching the thing about his parents' death, which again is continuing the parents' plot line. And we don't really need that. So instead, it's still that song that it plays, the Gone, Gone, Gone song. Don't sing it. And like it. So no.
Baby, I'm not moving on. I love you long after you're gone. That's a great song. I love that song.
It's a great song when the original guy sings it. Yeah.
to
So
listen to that so
instead
much.
of like this whole like this is where he builds his obsession goal. So instead of him being like, oh, this is connected to my parents, blah, blah, blah.
like using red tape to connect it all together, like I was mentally doing for those podcasts, those 2 podcast episodes.
Like instead of that, he just like looks through old photos of him and Harry, maybe him and Gwen as well. But like this is where he goes like back into his past and kind of reminisces about him and Harry.
Him and Harry together, and also reminisces about him and Gwen, because that's what we're trying to fix about this, is trying to make that the core heart of the movie is Peter and Gwen's relationship.
Yeah, I also don't like how Harry has this like random drive that he has that drive from Norman Osborn, right? And then like he gets this itch on his neck, and then he like accidentally pricks his finger. He's like, ah, and then he drops it on the table, and then it just miraculously lands on the table in the right spot, and then that's when he can open the drives and stuff.
Oh yeah,
About the mutated
that was
spiders.
weird.
I just thought that was super strange. Kevin Feige didn't have any notes about that, but I was like, that seems really odd to me. I don't like that. And I haven't heard anyone else criticize either, but I was like, I do not like this random hard drive that just like...
With all these little Easter eggs.
Yeah, like that's how he discovers the mutated spiders. He just happens to prick his finger and drop the drive on the table. I'm like, do we need this?
Like he looks at all those files, and also there's a Dr. Morbius file in those.
Yeah, we don't
among
need that.
the-
We
among
don't
any
need
of
all
those.
these setups. Like, they're like, because we obviously...
And also,
we
Australia
know now,
Project is one of them.
we know now that like they don't do any of that. Like
Exactly.
it doesn't continue.
We're from the future, so we know that these
Yeah.
spin-offs never happen.
That's why these videos are so fun, because we know how it turns out.
We're from the future, so
Yeah.
we know.
So yeah, we don't need that. But I do think that he's like instead he's actively pursuing it. Like he goes to the scientists and he's like demanding like, is there anything you can do for me? Because he's like so obsessed with it or whatever. And they suggest to him that he should focus on making his father's company the best it can be and living his life to the fullest before he dies, instead of focusing on trying to prevent or postpone his death. But he disregards them, and he's like, it doesn't matter if I die anyway. So he like they tell him that he still has multiple decades. Like his dad died when he was 60, dude. Like you don't. But he still ignores them, and he's obsessed. Like he finds the videos about Richard Parker and Norman Osborn. And so he's like obsessed with them. And he's obsessed with this mutated spider thing. And then we have the scene where Peter's experimenting on his new web shooter. I like that scene.
I love that scene. Like, 'cause that's a very Peter Parker thing to do. Like, he gets a web shooter fried, and then he's trying to figure out how, like, what's the best way to prevent his web shooter. I'll use this arm. Like, what's like his web shooter gets fried, and so then he's trying to figure out the best way to just like fix it to prevent that happening again. And like he does that whole experiment thing, but he doesn't figure out the answer until later in the film.
Which is very
that's
Spider-Man
one
to
thing
do.
I praise in the. That's another true to Peter Parker's character, is that they actually do that. That's what Peter Parker would do. Also, in that scene in Times Square when he's trying to like reason with Max, he doesn't go punching right away. That's another Peter Parker thing to do. Is like trying to help him instead of just go just full fists blazing or webs blazing, I should say, all the time.
Yeah, I do like that, like, because a central part of Peter Parker is experimentation and innovation, right? Like, when he fights a new villain, usually he'll get beat by
He'll
the
get beat,
villain.
he'll try
and
to
then
figure out like a clever way to like do it.
Yeah.
Like even in the comics, whenever he fought Electro for the first time, he lost, and then he used rubber gloves and just in order to be able to punch him because rubber insulates electricity.
Yeah. Except the only thing I would do is tone down that weird YouTube guy. Like the guy he's watching the YouTube tutorial for, and he's like, "Rah, explosions! If you do the battery and it..." Like, do you remember that?
Maybe, yeah, I do remember that. Maybe get a different YouTuber. This is all
Yeah,
Dan.
just someone more
Dan
calm.
TDM per se. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
That's like a step down. That's not an upgrade. That's downgrade.
I'm
like,
joking. So
it's-
just
it-
tone
yeah,
down the YouTube
Like
guy.
again, it's these weird tonal things. Like it's trying to be super serious at times, and then you have things where this guy's like, "Oh, a battery!"
You put a battery in it, overcharge it, it explodes.
Yeah, like we don't need. Why
Well,
does
you
he have
can
to be
keep
like
that.
that?
Keep that detail, but just
Like, is
tone
that-
down the YouTuber, but keep the detail of if you overcharge the battery, it'll explode. Because that sets up what they do with electric.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. Keep the same content, but change the way it's presented. Like, just make it a
Yeah.
normal dude. Like, were YouTubers like that in 2014?
I guess.
I mean,
So then,
yeah, I
the
don't know.
Gwen researching is the same where she's at Oscorp researching. Then this is the part where we instead of learning this earlier in the film, we learn it here at this point.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier.
That yeah, I get what you're saying. Like that when Oscorp's trying to cover Max's death.
Yeah, because she suspects that it's the same guy who was at Times Square, and then she's like, and then we have the scene where Harry asks Peter to come up to his office, and he's like asking him to get Spider-Man. His blood, like to get him a conversation with Spider-Man, and Peter actually suggests the same thing that the scientists said, where they're like, you should focus on running, Oscorp and like trying to be good instead of just like trying to postpone your death. But yet he still disregards them again.
He says like he still want to keep the thing where he needs Spider-Man's blood.
Yeah, like he's still obsessed with that because he thinks that's the next thing that can save him. And I think the scene where Peter and Gwen are in the maintenance closet,
That's a
good scene. Except like the kissing thing, like it's like they're not together, but the whole movie they're just like acting the same way they would if they were together.
Yeah,
They're like kissing in the closet and like. So I don't know,
guess-
maybe do something with that, but like also the part where he's cartoonishly like tripping these guys and like.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
I like that
you
scene.
That's fine, but you can take that. Like
Yeah.
similar to something what I said about the montage stuff. Maybe I like that stuff, but maybe just take it out for the sake of making the movie a little bit
Yeah.
more serious.
I
Or
like
we'll
it-
Take it seriously.
Like we like it, but it belongs in a different version of this movie.
Yeah.
So-
and then also keep the scene with Harry Osborn and Gwen talking in the elevator. That scene is actually really good.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. That little like interaction there and like the kind of the foreshadowing. You know what I mean?
And then Electro scene in Ravencroft basically is the same, but here's one change I would make.
What?
I know it's Dr. Kafka in the movie, which is an important character, but I would change it to Dr. Otto Octavius. Who would play him, I have no idea. But I can't think of a guy off the top of my head. I would say Chris Cooper, but they cast it as Norman Osborn, so I can't say that.
Chris Cooper as Doc Ock?
That's just the first name. I hadn't been thinking about that, but he was cast as Norman Osborn. Anyways, I mean, I would change it. This might be a bold move, but I would change it to like instead of Ravencroft scene, I would put Otto Octavius, the one experimenting on Electro. I feel like that'd be a bit of a bold move, but I feel like it would set up Amazing Spider-Man 3 better.
Yeah, I guess that's a good idea. And also the next scene where like that's the scene where Aunt May finds his obsession wall and she's like, "Oh, let me tell you the truth about your parents now."
So then that scene is
I just cut that scene out. Just cut the entire thing out. We don't need it. And then like
next scene is the Spider-Man and Harry. That's can stay the same.
yeah, I think that scene should stay exactly the same. The scene where Spider-Man confronts Harry and he's like, "I can't give you my blood, dude." And then Harry gets all mad. Except maybe like
Tone down him yelling about Spider-Man.
yeah, because people didn't like that as much. They're like, "Oh, his performance is so weird."
Because like Harry Osborn, like that's why I think I like Norman Osborn better than Harry Osborn. Because Harry Osborn's just a spoiled brat, whereas Norman Osborn is amazing and like super intelligent, intimidating, and his son Harry is just a spoiled brat, basically.
Yeah, well, I like that. I think that Harry's plotline fits better with where I think they were going, or
Yeah.
where I'm going with this pitch. About the whole life and birth and living life to the fullest thing or whatever, if you want to talk about the mushy gushy stuff. But then we have the scene where like Gwen's going to her interview at Oxford because she's trying to get in, which we didn't really touch on that much, but the whole Oxford thing is still a part of the movie.
Yeah.
In case you guys were wondering where Gwen's going
So
off.
like Peter, so then she goes to the Oxford interview scene, but then Peter doesn't do the whole thing of like the My Fair Lady like references like the English stuff like John Hopkins.
Yeah, I didn't think it fit where he's like, "Who am I? I'm John Hopkins. I'm from Harvard. I'm trying to recruit her, I don't." Because then he just goes, he's like super serious, and then he's like, "Oh, so I'm sorry, my fair lady. I I'm John Hopkins. I'm from Harvard, and then like he goes immediately back to being serious. So just,
Yeah,
like,
that scene.
that scene's the same, except cut that part out. Like I didn't really like that much.
Yeah.
And then we
Roosevelt.
have the Roosevelt.
Roosevelt scene where Peter Parker takes his calculator, gets angry, throws it against the wall, finds tokens, take those tokens to the Roosevelt station. He puts them in, and then he realizes that he lifts a train out of the ground with his father's secrets, and that.
Yeah, like
Once again, I needed to
need
vent.
that?
I'm sorry.
or they were just like in the writers' room. And they're like, yes, this is the story that we need to tell. Like seriously, come on, let's be reasonable here.
Once again, I'm sorry. I needed to breathe.
We don't need that.
The podcast episode that was way worse.
So then I like the scene where Harry like finds out that the venom is being extracted from the spiders. So from Shelby.
I prefer Sylvia. That's because I'm more like a Spider-Man name.
So like okay, whatever, Sylvia, whatever. Although I feel like Sylvia is another character though.
It is another character, but it's not important.
Who is she?
She was someone from like the Spider-Man 90s animated series, like the episode with the Spot. She's not an important character.
Right.
Yeah, she's not an important character, so like you can just put that in, no one will care.
Yeah, that's like just a nice little that person. Okay, yeah, a nice little reference. Not like a setup for their whatever.
Yeah, like the
universe
one
they're
setup
gonna
thing is putting Otto Octavius being the one experimenting on Electro in that one scene. It's the one setup, so they can set up and Spider-Man 3 better. So like I guess it's probably a bold move to do, but I feel like it would set up the third movie better.
And instead of this whole thing where like the CEO or the chairman guy is like out to get Harry out of Oscorp, and it's like this whole big conspiracy thing. Instead, he's like so obsessed with the venom, like Sylvia tells him that the venom was extracted from the spiders before they died. Same thing in the movie, and then he gets like obsessed with that, and he goes and he's like demanding that the scientists give him the venom or whatever.
Because he thinks that like it'll like help. It'll basically help.
Yeah,
him.
because he's desperate, and then what are you gonna say?
But also that's like in the movie that kind of doesn't go well for him because if you mix the venom with his hypoplasia thermia, however you pronounce his disease, it mixes, it creates the goblin thing.
It has a name.
Hyperplagial thermia. I can't say it. I know what it is. I just can't say it.
Okay.
Not that it's bad. I
don't know
I
that
can't
I'm
pronounce it.
I don't know that I'm entirely sold on that plot line in the first place, but whatever. It's staying in.
It's in the movie.
So instead, like when he gets to the science, he's like, "Give me the DNA" or whatever. They actually like confront him, and they're like, "Hey, Oscorp stocks are like way down. You're doing a bad job of running this company, and like you're not even focusing on running the company at all. You're just focusing on yourself." And then he still like demands that they give him the.
But then
no, okay. So actually, no. So then they fire him.
They fire him. They just completely remove him.
Except for it's for just reasons. It's not like he's like.
It's not like
it's not like
Donald Menken's doing it. But do you want to keep Donald Menken in the movie? Yeah.
That was Donald Menken.
You didn't know that? Yeah.
I forgot.
Do you want to keep him in the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, keep him in.
Because he's not like setting up.
He doesn't do it
anything.
out of spite. He's not. His whole movie.
Yeah.
So that's the change. Then he fires. That's Norman Osborn's company. So he fires Harry, and Harry goes to trying to break him out, and then it's the same. But I feel like you should tone down Harry's performance in that because he seems like a little whiny kid.
Yeah, he's
he's
like, no, you and me, let's work together now.
So I tone that down like a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. We don't need all of that. And then, like instead of Peter and Harry, Harry and Electro, their whole escape plan thing. That's like intercut with the scene where Peter walks away from Roosevelt and then he gets the call from Gwen.
Oh yeah.
Like he walks away from Roosevelt and gets a call from Gwen, and then we go back to the Harry and Electro thing. Instead, I think the scenes where Harry breaks Electro out of prison and then he goes to Oscorp to like demand that they give him the Green Goblin thing. I think those scenes should happen directly after each other. So kind of like change that up.
So after Harry and Electro escape, you go straight into the.
Oh yeah. Also, another little note is that earlier in the scene where Harry brought Peter to Oscorp to like talk about the Spider-Man thing, that's where he introduced him to somewhere in that scene he mentions and he shows Peter the advanced suit.
Oh,
thing,
the Goblin suit. Yeah, that was a deleted scene from the.
Yeah. Because I looked at a list of all the deleted scenes, and that was in there, and I was like, "That's good to set up."
When I bought Amazing Spider-Man 2, I made sure to watch all the deleted scenes. That was one of them.
So how does that come up in the conversation though?
So like he brings him, so he has Felicia Hardy bring him into this like room, and he shows it to him as like part of his like little experiment thing, and then he's like basically just showing a guy wearing it, showing how it's like Oscorp is part of like new tech. I haven't watched it in a while, but I think that's like the main gist of it.
Okay.
And then he throws like some kind of ball, and then like Peter like not like that. He like catches it like this. He just catches the ball from he uses like his spider reflexes. Like he catches the ball like right in front of Felicia's face, and then like she's like nice reflexes.
Oh, Felicia said that?
Yeah.
I need to see that scene now. I didn't see the scene. I just read about it, and I was
I've
like,
seen
"That's
it.
that's a good idea. We need to set that up earlier because it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like Harry puts the DNA into his arm, and then he's like dying, and then he's just like, at least we have this suit here that's just magically there, and just like the perfect opportunity. It heals him and saves his life. Like what are the odds? Okay,
I know that's as Deadpool would say. That's just lazy writing.
yeah, like he just happened to be in the right spot to where he wouldn't die. Like, are you kidding me? Come on, that's not how life works.
So then, that's exactly.
So speaking of before, it's not intercut. Like immediately after Harry gets turned to the Green Goblin, and then he's like.
So then,
well, also in that scene, I just want to say, he kills all of the scientists there. Like all the scientists are still in the room.
okay, so he kills all the scientists. But do you want to keep that scene, fellas? This was cut from the movie. I've actually seen this.
Where
Do
he
you
kills
want to
Donald
keep that
Lincoln?
scene where he takes Donald Lincoln up to the air and like says stuff to him and he just drops him? Or
Yeah,
would that
because-
be too dark?
No, I think we should keep that
Okay,
in
keep
because
that-
now
that-
this shows that Harry is officially past the point of no return now. Like he he has them put him in the goblin suit as a precaution. Like he's still aware of the like danger, so he has them put him in the costume
Yeah.
before they gave him the serum, just so that's not like he's like dying and he's like, thank goodness the suit is here. But like, yeah, I think that's like now it's fully like showing Harry's turn to the villain side, and like him killing Donald Lincoln is like the final step. So now he's
Alright.
like beyond the point of no return. And then we have the scene.
The bridge scene changes. So instead, Peter is wrapping up. So instead of changing it, is that Peter Parker's like stopping a crime as Spider-Man. He gets a call and he just finished catching a few like muggers, and then he gets a call from Gwen saying that she's leaving. And then after that, he immediately starts swinging to the bridge to create that little love letter to Gwen on the bridge, which there actually was a deleted scene in the film where they showed him like swinging to the bridge, but they didn't finish it because it would have cost them $7 million to complete, and that was out of the budget.
For
so
one scene?
yeah, for that one web swinging scene, it would have cost them $7 million to complete it, so they ended up not finishing.
Must have been a pretty big scene.
Well, those web swinging scenes were expensive.
We don't need. Yeah, well, they look phenomenal. So
Yeah, that's yeah. He said that one shot where it would show him swinging before like the bridge. He said that would have been $7 million. That would have gone over budget. So they just decided to not do it.
Yeah, well, we don't need that anyway. It's just good to see it from Gwen's perspective as she sees the.
So then the rest of the scene basically it's just the same.
But now we get into the final battle. And I feel like the Peter magnetizing his web shooter shouldn't have just been done like right there in that moment. Like 2 seconds before the final battle is when he magnetizes his web shooters. I feel like it should have been done like maybe in a scene earlier. He like figures it out himself, so that's more set up before the final battle because it just kind of comes out of nowhere. And also, I feel like Gwen should have like maybe in the scene where she's researching Max Dillon, she researches more about the specs of the power grid because like literally it just comes out of nowhere in the finale when they're moving into it. She all of a sudden just like, I know the specs of the grid. I know how the grid works.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So like
It comes out of nowhere.
she sees that in like the Oscar thing.
Yeah, it's like paid off instead of just out of nowhere. But yeah, so there's those two things, and the rest of it is pretty much the same, except like as he's swinging over to the power grid and chasing Electro, he sees in the sky. Do we even need the planes?
No,
We don't need the planes.
that's just basically.
I like the planes.
I don't. It's just, I feel like it just doesn't make much sense. I mean, I can fight. You said Spider-Man needs to feel more responsible for preventing the planes from crashing, but still, that doesn't even need to be there because they're just trying to pair a lot of Dark Knight on the boats.
No, I think they were trying to add tension in there because there wasn't as much. Because again, all of this stuff just kind of comes out of left field. So they're like, we need a way to add actual tension into the scene, and let's put the planes thing. So yeah, cut the planes out. I guess we don't need that. I like it, but I don't think we need it. I guess.
So then basically it's the same. So then instead,
Oh yeah, also another little note. The scene where Electro's like grabbing Spidey and like electrocuting him, and then he looks over and he sees Gwen driving over in a car. Like
yeah, he just sees
Electro
her,
can move super fast.
So they showed that he's teleported. So then
And then he just stands there and watches as she comes and hits him with the car. Like, come on,
He's
like
not
take
standing
that
there, but
somehow, some other way that scene goes down. We don't need the thing where like that's kind of dumb. I do like the itsy bitsy spider bit where he plays it on the thing. I like that a lot. I know a lot of people criticize that. Like, oh,
I do like
Goofy's
that.
silly, but I think that's a nice touch.
he's like I hate this song.
Yeah. And so, cut out the planes thing. Okay, whatever, fine. So then we come to the Goblin fight. Harry comes in, And then that basically plays out pretty much exactly the same. I know it kind of feels like Harry comes in out of nowhere, but I think we should give him something else to do. Like, cause he breaks out, he transforms into the Green Goblin, he's like super mad and everything. And he
kills
just kind of like,
Lincoln and all the scientists.
and he kind of like disappears, and he just kind of randomly comes in. I think maybe some point in the scene we could see him see the power grid go off, and then know that Spider-Man's there, and then start heading there. Like, just have a shot that establishes that.
Okay.
So it's not just like
Yeah, that
Spidey
makes
beats
sense.
Electro, and then all of a sudden Green Goblin comes in. And he's
Yeah,
like,
as if it's like it's like a very video game style. Like you defeat one boss and then another boss comes in. It's like, uh-oh.
yeah. Like, I feel like we should have a shot setting that up beforehand.
That would be good.
I feel that's better. And then the rest of that scene is basically the same. I really like the Gwen Stacy death scene. Just, it's gut wrenching. You're on the edge of your seat as Spidey's trying to stop Gwen from falling, and he like webs her, and he's trying to help her, and like there's the gears turning. And
but then, like most things in Spider-Man, try as hard as you can, and bad things will still happen. So like he's trying to prevent it, but it's just a moment too late, and the gears turn, the web snaps, and then he ultimately fails to catch her. Well, he doesn't fail to catch her. He fails.
Maybe
to
kind of
stop her
changed the
dying.
web, like turning into a hand. I don't know if I love that.
I kind of like that.
Like where the web's like a hand. I don't know. It's whatever. That's a little mind
So
thing.
then so set up Harry knowing that Spider-Man is there, so it feels less out of nowhere. So then the final fight is basically the same, and keep everything from the original. Just keep everything from the original fight. Just keep it like the same.
I really like the fight between Green Goblin and Spider-Man. I think it's really gut wrenching. You're on the edge of your seat. It's super. The tension is there. I really like that scene. And then of course Gwen dying is super heartbreaking.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's such a sad scene. I feel like we should let it linger a little bit more. That like her death and like how sad Peter is. I know some people were saying they should add back in the scene where his dad comes and tells him with great power comes great responsibility. But
Yeah.
I feel like that's a little weird.
No. Oh no. I don't think it should.
Yeah. Why'd you say yeah? You're like
I
yeah.
I'd say we.
I was like, I know you hate that scene.
I hate that scene. No, I don't want that scene added back in. Yeah,
I think it is a little weird, especially since we cut out the entire parents plotline. If he just
Yeah,
comes
don't-
at the end, he's like,
Don't add that in. Leave that out. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. So leave that out. When and then the funeral scene is the same. When it's instead of like having like so you actually like so you have the scene where Gwen dies, but you let it sit for longer. And then the Sinister Six setup is removed.
Yeah, the whole thing where he's the basement of like setups where he's
The
like
basement of
walking-
origins.
the thing where he's like walking through, and then like there's the vulture suit, there's the rhino. It's like
Doug Ock's arms, Vulture's wings. In a deleted promo in a TV spot showed the Venom symbiote. That apparently was removed.
yeah. And Sony's like, let's edit all this stuff.
All these Easter eggs.
Like, dude. And then, except that there was a note from Kevin Feige that said maybe have someone go into special projects and you see that the rhino suit was stolen to set up Alexi's like thing. I think that's a good idea. So probably add that in somewhere.
Yeah, and then you had to think like Peter Parker seeing like being motivated to come back as Spider-Man by watching Gwen's speech.
Yeah, I like that speech, and it underlines the theme, not undermines, underlines the theme of the movie that's kind of set up throughout the whole thing about life and living life, all the stuff that nobody wants to talk about, but I feel like is important.
So you keep that, and then the ending is changed. So like the ending is changed from it shows the rhino suit is stolen. I guess maybe you can keep the Easter eggs, maybe, but just show that the rhino suit has been stolen. And then instead of Paul Giamatti being crazy, he's still toned down. He's wearing the rhino suit, and then keep the kid running out to the street.
Yeah, I don't know if I love the kid. Like, it's kind of stupid. Like, the kid's like, I'm gonna take on the rhino. Like, sure you are.
Yeah, I can see how that would be.
That's just bad parenting. And the mom's like doesn't notice until he's out there in the street, and she's like, like, kind of strange. But I think it still works. Like, I can still take it seriously and take it on its own terms. So you know what, leave it in there. And then Spidey comes and. I like that scene. It's a nice heroic ending. I heard someone complaining about how they didn't show the fight, but I think it's better that they didn't, because it's like it underlines the theme of the movie. You never know when it's gonna end, when life's gonna end, so you might as well live it.
Well, it's also kind of a bad way to end it, because that's when the franchise ended. It's just that never continued on from that point.
Yeah, but it's like.
But yeah, if it's still keep it like in terms of like if we're to get a third movie in this hypothetical universe, then just ending it.
Which I think it might have if the movie played out like this.
So that's basically the full rundown of our way to fix He's writing too. Again, we're no professional screenwriters. These are like just us just throwing out ideas of how to fix the movie. Like, we're not professional screenwriters. We're not trying to say that we're better than the writers who wrote this movie. We're not trying to say we're better than Mark Webb. Because the movie itself has some great moments. It's just a few things that need to be trimmed out and some stuff that can be improved to make it better than the version that we got. The version of the film that we got is good. It's just bogged down. It's just a complete mess, and the bad stuff bogs it down. This bogs down the good stuff.
I think the movie is good. I appreciate what they were doing. I kind of respect what was happening, but there are some things that I wish could have been done better. And it's just from the attitude of, we love Marvel, and we love it when Marvel makes good stuff. So this is just our idea of, what if Marvel, was a little bit smarter with their writing, wasn't being mandated to set up all this stuff by Sony. What if they're telling an actual meaningful story that they were trying to tell? And this is just our version of what we think it would be like. So, if you liked it, let us know. If you didn't like it, also let us know down in the comments down below. And if you liked this video, this is the first video on Fanboy Fix Up. We plan to do more, so let us know what movie you want us to do next. And subscribe so you never miss the videos that we post, and turn on notifications because you're going to want to be notified whenever we release a new video. And thank you so much for watching if you made it to the end of this over an hour long video. And we'll see you next time.
Don't make promises you can't keep, but those are the best kind. Peace out, guys.
Scene where he's like, "Oh, I'm following you everywhere now. I'm following." Get off your watch, dumb. I feel like I feel like get off your watch.
Settle down, son.